Well, and so we made a schedule. We just decided that we were gonna try and write every morning for, what was it, 2 hours or
Mhm.
something, and I think it was 2 days into filming, we realized that the Sundance deadline was the beginning of
2 days
July,
into writing, yeah.
and this was the beginning of July, and the Sundance deadline for, like, the late deadline, like, the last possible time you could submit was, like,
October
October 6th
2nd.
or 2nd or something
Yeah.
like that. So we had
You, like, sent me a text at night.
yeah.
You were like, "This is should we?"
I just I mean, for us, we approached this as I described, we approached this just because we wanted
We
something.
weren't even considering, like we were thinking, like, maybe we'll get to film this eventually, but we could film it if we wanted to because we're writing it doably. Like
Right, that was kind of our thought, like, this is something we thought we could maybe make, but
mhm,
we didn't think we were gonna submit it anywhere or do
right.
anything. It was just we were gonna write something that could possibly be made during this horrible time.
That deadline, that was a fire. That was, like, where I
Yeah.
finally felt, like, not just, like, pressure, but, like, excitement. I was like, "Whoa, we could actually make something that means something," which is a terrible way to think because everything means something, and this whole process would have been so beneficial for me had I never submitted this anywhere.
Mhm.
But
Sure.
just knowing that, like, there was something outside of myself, which it was just me this whole pandemic. So, like, having finally something entering into the equation that was outside of me, outside of my control, felt invigorating because I was like, "I haven't been used to this for months."
It gave us purpose,
Yeah.
during a very purposeless time, and I think it's honestly this is maybe just like a life sidebar, but I think it's really, really healthy to acknowledge that we often just create our purpose.
Mhm. Yeah.
We don't have to, like, spend our lives finding it or like, I think some people really take a lot of comfort in the idea that they really understand why they're here on the planet, but I think most of us just find something that gives our day value and meaning. It's like, I really love my job, or I feel like I am put here to figure out, like, to help these kids get out into the world or
Right,
whatever it is,
right.
like I think that for a time we had our temporary purpose, which was like, we are going to use this pandemic to learn how to make movies because it's something we've always wanted to do and never been able to justify or have time to truly try.
Mhm.
So we decided to go for it. And I just remember being super scared. I remember saying, like, "We are gonna do this. We're gonna go for it, but we have to pull the plug if we feel like we're ruining it to
Yeah.
get it done in 3
Yeah.
months." Like, that's a crazy,
We
crazy
wanted to be
timeline
realistic.
for a movie, and we haven't even written it yet, and we're trying to say we're gonna submit it to, like, top tier
Yeah.
festivals in 3 months, and we've never made one before. We've made web series and sketches and a bunch of videos on our family's camcorder when we were children, but we have not made a movie yet, and, it felt, like, very scary, and we just, yeah, said that we would pull the ripcord if we felt like we were ruining it, and we never did.
It was definitely the test of, like, how in it are we going to be here?
Are we actually doing
Are we
this?
actually doing this? And that's when we talked about, okay, how much money can we pool together, the 3 of us, because Steven had joined on at this point, and we were asking if he would help us produce and direct,
Correct, yeah.
and so we said, "'Kay, if we pool our resources together, how much can we actually give to a film?" And we had gotten our friend Dave and Steven's parents to
Mhm,
also join on and help us,
mhm.
which was amazing that we had just talked some people into giving us thousands of dollars.
Right, right.
So we had been able to pool together like a few thousands, a few tens of thousands of dollars,
Mhm.
and which is not nothing. And I recognize like lots of people don't even have that much to spend on a film. But that was also we'd gotten a PPP loan from the
Oh,
government.
yes, we had.
So we had just gotten anywhere we could some resources to just like keep getting a few at a time to say, "Okay,
Mhm.
we went to our friend Babetta and said, "Can we actually make a movie for
For
this
this
much?"
this amount of money.
And she went through her budget and said, "We can."
Mhm.
So we
'Cause she's a
decided, because
goddess.
she is, and she knows
Yes.
how to make things work. We also, after like 10 plus years of experience working in this field, had garnered a beautiful community of film people.
Yeah, and favorites.
Yes, and so we knew exactly, like, we want Brenna for DPing, we want Brendan for sound, we want, all these different things that we knew we wanted. and we're able to ask them for favors.
Right.
And we never wanted to have anyone work for free or
Mhm.
deferred payment. Like that was never what we wanted to do.
Especially for a movie that we genuinely were like, we are making this for experience. And we're making this to hopefully get on the radar of some new friends and some new people we can network with. But we cannot guarantee. Like, we're not going to be like, we'll pay you on the back end for this
There was
pandemic
no
movie
back
we're
end
making
as much as
while
we
the
knew.
world blows up.
Right.
You know, like, genuinely, everything was in question at the time.
We just thought essentially we were pouring money into a drain, and that eventually, hopefully, we would get like some sort of experience out of it. But yeah, so being able to like ask people for like, what's the lowest rate you would take for this movie?
Right.
But I think everyone was on board because they were like, hey, you're making a movie right now? And no one was doing it. And they knew that, like, I mean, we weren't making any money on this.
That it was just a true passion project.
True passion project.
Yeah.
So we got all our faves. We got like our whole community together. Yeah, we were super lucky with our crew. And so we were able to get everyone on a schedule, quick schedule, and for everyone to be free those 2 weeks that we were filming was another miracle. Just another like moment where we recognize like it feels like
we just are on track.
We should be doing this.
Yeah.
It felt like
right
it was
place.
Yeah, right place, right time. So pre-production started happening, and then Babetta we had a COVID scare.
Right. Her sister, who was working at BYU TV, had someone on Studio C where she worked got it. So everyone had to go and quarantine and get tested. And Babetta almost had to pull out last minute, which was crazy because we were also filming a ton in her house.
Yep.
Because of the pandemic restrictions and everything, we tried to keep everything as contained as possible.
We filmed like 3 different locations in that house.
Yeah. And then, you know, obviously a ton in the car, as much outdoor stuff as we possibly could to try and keep those things safe as well.
And with a skeleton crew. So, I mean, we had, I think, 7 people on set usually, including us.
Yeah.
So bare bones, trying to keep it as small as possible, trying to keep it as safe as possible. But
trying
again,
to touch as little as possible.
this was July now that we were starting to film. We still had no access to tests. If you wanted to just go and get tested, you could go if you had symptoms or if you had a doctor's note or if you worked for a huge corporation that was giving you access to testing. But you couldn't actually go and just get one at this point.
It was harder, at least.
It was harder.
Yeah.
And so luckily our crew like had been getting tested frequently from their other projects. So we just basically banked on everyone quarantining and taking temperatures at the beginning of every day and just like keeping masks and hand sanitizing. But we really couldn't take any other precautions besides that.
Right. Eventually, it sort of felt like we were bubbling as like a tiny little crew. We still wore masks whenever we weren't on camera, and the crew wore masks and everything. And we tried to be fairly distanced when we ate and things like that. But we got very lucky. No one got it.
No one got it. We did have an AD throw up on set.
Yeah.
But that was just heat stroke. That was
which happened.
Dear Summer, she was a trooper. I just looking at like the actual production process. That's probably when I first started feeling like maybe this isn't meant to happen.
No, I mean, do you remember our first day of filming?
Our first day, I think, is the worst day of filming I've ever experienced.
And we've had thousands, right?
Yeah.
And it was genuinely like we had all this like piss and vinegar, and we were so like, this is kind of great. We're going for it. We're gonna go for it. We're gonna send our film into Sundance.
Our first 4 hours,
we spent the first
half day.
The first half day filming, 2/3 a page.
It was a montage in rollerblades that did not fit us because I was getting all the props by asking people on Facebook.
Right.
So I asked anyone if they had rollerblades, and we borrowed Jason's and we borrowed another man's rollerblades. So we had 2 adult male-sized rollerblades, and they were not structured because Jason's was like inline skating or something because they didn't.
Fancy people, and they're supposed to be very well fit to your feet, and my feet were too small in there. So I was in so much pain.
I was in those skates for just the last hour of filming that day, and I started getting blisters. And I was I can't do this. I don't know how Mal did this for 6 hours.
It was terrible. It was terrible.
And we had Bane. We had the dog with us,
We had the dog, and he's really sweet and old.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of hard. It's always hard. Children and dogs, everybody knows it's hard. Like, it's going to add time to your schedule. But In the future, I would just suggest to anyone who is doing some kind of guerrilla filmmaking, anything, start with something that's going to feel like a really quick win. Like a scene you can get out in 3 hours or something like that, because you just get to feel amazing. Because by the time we were eating lunch and we were like, we filmed a montage that is not even like crucial to the story. Like we might cut it,
And it took up like 2 paragraphs.
It was that was really hard. We both got extremely sunburned on day 1 as well.
And
so did Steven.
We had set up the luau, which was a huge part of the plot.
Yes.
We had set that up for the second half of the day. It was going to be like a very tight schedule as it was.
And it required us to assemble a certain number of extras, which was also very stressful at the time.
No one wanted to be by each other.
Nobody wanted to be by each other, and we didn't want anyone to feel unsafe either.
I didn't want to ask anyone to come.
So you were trying to approach families who could kind of stay in clusters and that we could distance and keep apart from each other.
So we'd gathered all these extras. And then a storm came in.
A windstorm hit.
Randomly. Which just, when you're filming something chronologically and you just had a montage that leads into the next scene and it's completely different weather.
Right.
You can't do it.
Can't do it. And then we lost our location for the next day, which was the dog breeder scene day.
And we had a fantastic location.
We
had written the scene around it.
Yeah, we'd written the scene and then seen the location and tweaked it so that we could block it to the specific space we were in, and we lost that location.
So it was like we basically got like 2/3 of a page done in an entire day and had to scrap everything else and lost our location for the next day.
Super sunburned for our entire film shoot.
Yeah.
As well.
I went to Smith's that day to get some more stuff for our next day of filming. And because we had new phone covers as props for the show, I didn't have my card with me anymore because I carry it with my phone. And when I didn't realize that till I'd gotten to the store. So I just like stopped in the parking lot and just cried. Yeah. I just was like, we're not doing this. We had a good run.
We're just a bunch of silly hacks. Don't know. Like I journaled about it that night and just said this was like the worst day ever.
I assumed literally, I was like, well, there it goes. Like, we're not going to do this movie.
Yeah. All of my sort of, I think we're in the right place at the right time. This is like, we're right on track feelings completely gone.
Yep.
And the next morning we drove out to the next location and we kind of just
forgot your mask.
I forgot my mask.
Yeah.
And it was like an hour away.
It was a prop mask. Like, we needed to have the same ones. So we had to have someone else drive.
My sister drove it out, but that took like 2 hours. So we had to start like 3 hours late at a new location where we rewrote the scene to fit with this new location.
The first 2 days, I think, were
brutal.
They
were like
for sure.
They were for sure. It was baptism by fire.
Yeah.
And it was the way
and we had a new crew too. Like, we had our favorites, but we also had like a few people we'd never worked with before. Some people, this was their first film set.
Right.
Because it was just like we were getting who we could get. And so like our grip was, bless his heart, like so new. Right. And he was our only grip.
Right.
So we were trying to set up
moving quickly
extensive sets for lighting that just like it was just going to take a while. That's what you get with a small crew.
Well, and that day was super complicated. Like, we talked to Steven about directing the movie for us, and he and I ended up co-directing the movie. I love directing, but I really struggle directing when I'm on camera. And I was like, I don't want to be in a situation where I feel like I receive no direction if something I'm doing is wooden or isn't working. So Steven was incredible. But that day, he and I were both acting. So we asked our friend Lane to come and direct that day. So one day, like, unit directors there that day. We start hours late. And it was just, it sort of felt like, I mean, I don't know if there's like an actual like archetype of this in all filmmaking, that like your first 2 days are going to be pure hell. You have to push through it or something.
You have
like
to. Because honestly, Stephen and I had talked to Vanessa and Joseph Winter after all of this was done, and they were making Deadstream,
yeah.
Which they had been putting months into. They had spent like half a year getting this into the works, and pre-production took way longer for them. They put in the time that we wished we could have put in.
And we did not put in the time, so there were times where I feel like we didn't earn it.
But they still they couldn't use their their whole first day of filming, they told me.
Ugh.
Because they were just like, it was so hard to get everything done. And Joseph, who was directing and, well, no, Vanessa was directing, but he was in his director's mindset too.
And wasn't he sort of DPing? Because it's like a GoPro film?
It was a GoPro film.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was so wooden the whole time from acting because everything was so just crazy that they just couldn't use any of that footage. So it just was like, it was a reminder to me of like, I think that's just what indie filming is. Like indie filmmaking is going to be rough when you're all getting like on the same page. You're trying to have kismet. You're trying to get on like this rowing team with your crew.
Right.
But in the meantime, you're still trying to make scenes work when none of you are on that yet.
So maybe just expect bumps.
Expect big bumps.
Big bumps, like bumps that make you doubt yourself as a human being. Like it was definitely a struggle because we'd felt so much kind of joy through the writing process, just like on Zoom calls together, just improvising silly scenes and stuff. And then feeling like, are all of our silly scenes and our pandemic, is it worth like the pain that we're creating?
Right.
Is it worth, like, will we ruin, that's the question I always have on anything that I ever make. Because film is it's a team sport.
Yeah.
So when I make something and I feel like, this is going to be crap, I just think, well, I've wasted everyone's time.
Yep. And
I could have created more opportunities for these people by creating something that maybe people really liked that they could bring up in a conversation or an example they could put on a resume. But instead, I've made them look bad.
Right.
Like they are not talented, and that isn't true. And so I think that's just like the demon you always carry around.
A lot of pressure to put on yourself.
I feel like it's important to at least acknowledge that reality, that you have the power. Because to me, there's always like a business element. You're creating a business whenever you're
creating opportunities for everyone.
You're creating
hopefully everyone feels that way.
Yeah, and the hope is, like, I went to this insane thing in LA a couple months after I moved there, and right before the pandemic started. Where they were talking, it was a panel for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And someone asked the question of the actor who played Bruce Lee in that movie, what's it like to be on a Quentin Tarantino set? And he was like, well, the thing about being on a Quentin Tarantino set is that everyone wants to be there. Oh, like the feeling I felt was like, oh, what a dream.
Like everyone's gunning for that.
Everybody is so excited. And I'm sure it's not. Nothing is perfect ever. And filmmaking, I think on every level is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I think anybody who tells you like, oh, but if you were really working with the big guys, you wouldn't have issues like that's stupid.
Yeah.
It's all the same. It's like people and personalities and talent and trying to get on the same page and vision and how do we do this in 12 hours? It's always the same. So if you like that, then you're probably going to like it at any and every level. But the idea of trying to create projects that people are going to be excited to be on, it's very important to me because I want people to enjoy the process of making the movie and the product if possible. And you don't always get to have that. And so I think those first 2 days especially, it was like, great. So in order to give myself purpose during this pandemic, I have ruined everyone's lives, or at least the next couple weeks of their life or whatever.
No, I hear you. And it kind of felt that way a little bit for the first week.
Yeah, because it was hard.
Of a 2-week shoot.
Was it at the end of that week?
It was that Friday that we did the party scene.
Which
was another stressful one
because
very stressful. We all had to be the luau scene at least was outside. The party scene, we all had to be confined into one room and make it look like a bustling pre-COVID party.
Right.
But it was in the middle of COVID and no one wanted to come and take masks off and be right next to somebody. So
they shouldn't.
Right.
You know?
I mean, we were asking something maybe irresponsible, but we were trying to be as responsible about it as possible and take temperatures and only take masks off when needed. But we got a good group of people from Studio C and from our own group of friends and just like people who were doing us serious favors. You can even see like members of the crew in certain shots who are putting jackets on to like look like different people in the background. It's just like, I mean, was a sense of like just trying to make it work in the moment, which again, I think is why it was so good that we weren't married to like how perfect this was going to turn out. We knew what we wanted it to look like and feel like, and however we could get that, I think we weren't picky.
Yeah. For sure. And we ended up having to reshoot that scene.
We had to reshoot it anyway. So just goes to show that B unit days are a miracle in and of itself.
It's wild. It was just a crazy process, and it started off really rocky.
Second week, though, we just did like mostly all the car stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I really felt like, oh my goodness,
We might finish this.
we can do this. Because we got a process trailer for way cheaper than it should have actually cost, because the people there were so gracious and so great to us. And we're just excited that we were trying to make something right now. And so we got into that process trailer, and we're like doing like 10, 15 pages a day.
Oh yeah. We were cranking it out because you and I were pretty tight on our lines, which is good.
Yeah. So I felt like that was really a time where I felt like momentum was picking up. We could make this movie. We knew like kind of how the tone of most of this movie was going to feel because it was in our control.
Sure.
And then the last few days we got Anne and Julia.
And we did like
all the Nana stuff, all the
phone
stuff.
calls and all that stuff.
Gosh, it was just so fun to work with someone who like got the humor. Like those scenes with Julia in the forest and the wrestling scenes, I think was just like a wonderful way to end it.
It's so true.
It was just a pick-me-up of recognizing, oh, someone else, like even if they don't know the whole story of what we're shooting yet, like they're excited and they're bringing something that we didn't even write. They're bringing something of their own to it. I think that was a huge pick-me-up for me.
Yeah, I mean, Julia's incredible. She was like definitely, she was just like a shot in the arm for me, because I felt like she showed up and it felt like someone got what we were trying to do and was on board and was going to elevate it, because she's an incredible improviser. But the very first thing we shot together was us wrestling on the ground after I tackle her. And it was incredible. It was incredible. She was just like, we were just immediate sisters and friends, and it was not a big deal.
You had to stick your fingers in a stranger's mouth.
She stuck her fingers in my mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I felt for her more than me, actually, because I was like, that's grosser for her because she doesn't know where my mouth's been and her fingers, whatever. But like I felt...
This is an insight into your brain of how you treat yourself in terms of other people.
I guess that's fair.
But who cares about my mouth?
Who cares about me?
Her fingers.
No, but I just was really, really grateful for her. And I think we got really lucky with the people we got to work with in general. It was... We definitely wrote the movie to involve as little face-to-face with other people as possible. We ended up casting Steven, actually not because we didn't have other options, but because we knew he would nail it, and he did. Yeah. He was so good.
Yeah, I'm really
But
glad.
also it was like very safe option, and we stayed distanced from him even during that scene. That was part of the reason I feel like we decided to do a pandemic movie, was so that we could film it safely. But there were a couple of scenes, like the thing with the party and the luau and with Aaron and the tackling, that were truly like not pandemic friendly, even though they took those were the only things that were truly like, maybe you shouldn't film that during a pandemic.
Right.
You know,
we could end up having disastrous consequences because of this, like, fanciful idea that we had, and we chose like to have a few risks. I mean, we were very fortunate that it was, it ended up being a safe thing in the end, but.
Right.